Think Rwanda is just about tragic history and mountain gorillas? Wait until you find out that bringing a plastic bag into this country can land you in prison for 12 months, and every single citizen is legally required to spend one Saturday morning per month doing community service or face heavy fines. You won't believe that Rwanda has more women in parliament than any other country on earth, yet traditional culture still practices arranged marriages where families negotiate with cows. Number 15. Rwanda has the world's strictest plastic bag ban where airport security will literally arrest you for carrying a shopping bag. You heard right? Since 2008, Rwanda became one of the first countries globally to completely ban single-use plastic bags. And they're not kidding around with enforcement. Executives of companies that produce plastic bags can go to prison for up to 12 months or face other penalties. And this also applies to anyone illegally using a plastic bag. Picture this. You're arriving at Kigali International Airport with duty-free shopping and plastic bags, and customs officers confiscate everything, potentially leading to fines or detention. The ban isn't just symbolic. It covers manufacturing, usage, import, and sale of all plastic carrier bags. Any plastic bags in your luggage will be confiscated at the airport or other point of entry, as the country strives to protect, safeguard, and promote the environment, a matter which is written into their constitution. Think you can sneak one small bag through? Think again. Rwanda's border security is trained to spot even the smallest plastic items, and tourists regularly face confiscation of everything from toiletry bags to food packaging. Here's the wild part. This tiny African nation with limited resources has achieved what most developed countries haven't even attempted, creating one of the cleanest urban environments on the continent through sheer political will and citizen compliance. Number 14. Every Rwandan citizen is legally required to participate in monthly community work called umuganda, and skipping it results in hefty fines. Sounds unbelievable, but the last Saturday morning of every month from 8 a.m. to 11 a.m., all businesses close and every able-bodied Rwandan aged 18 to 65 must participate in community service activities or face penalties. Participation in community work, or umuganda, is mandatory or the person faces a fine. Picture an entire country stopping everything they're doing simultaneously, shops shuttered, offices empty, streets filled with citizens cleaning public spaces, building infrastructure, and discussing community issues. You won't believe the scope. Over 10 million people participate monthly in activities ranging from cleaning streets and planting trees to building schools and maintaining roads. Wait until you find out that even government ministers and business executives must show up with brooms and shovels, working alongside their employees and neighbors without any hierarchy. The fines for non-participation aren't trivial. Missing umuganda can cost you $50, which represents nearly a week's wages for many Rwandans. Here's the fascinating part. This mandatory community service has created social cohesion that most countries can only dream of, with neighbors who might never interact otherwise working together monthly to improve their communities. Rwanda's plastic ban, umuganda, and a decade-long awareness campaign have arguably made Kigali the cleanest city in Africa. Number 13. Rwanda has achieved something no other country has. Over 60% of their parliament members are women, yet traditional marriage still involves bride price negotiations with livestock. Here's the mind-blowing contradiction. Rwanda leads the world in female political representation with 61.3% of parliamentary seats held by women, surpassing even Nordic countries known for gender equality, yet rural families still practice centuries-old traditions where a groom's family must provide cows, goats, and cash to secure a bride. You heard right. The same country that has shattered political glass ceilings still maintains cultural practices where women's value is literally measured in cattle. Picture a female member of parliament who helped pass progressive gender equality laws, then attending her niece's traditional wedding, where her family negotiates how many cows she's worth. The bride price, called inkwano, typically ranges from 5 to 20 cows, plus additional livestock and monetary payments that can total $5,000 to $15,000, representing several years of average income. Think this creates conflict? Think again. Many Rwandan women see both systems as complementary, rather than contradictory, viewing political equality as progress while respecting cultural traditions that emphasize family honor and social connections. Here's where it gets really interesting. Some female politicians have used their positions to advocate for reforms in traditional marriage practices, pushing for laws that limit excessive bride price demands while preserving the cultural significance of the ceremonies. The TWA people, Rwanda's original inhabitants, still live in extreme poverty and social isolation despite making up less than 1% of the population. Wait until you find out about Rwanda's forgotten indigenous minority who face discrimination so severe that their children often can't attend school, and adults struggle to find employment despite government integration efforts. The TWA, traditionally forest-dwelling hunters and gatherers, were displaced when their ancestral lands became national parks and conservation areas, leaving them marginalized in a society that has largely moved on without them. Tradition holds that TWA were the original inhabitants. Hutu came second in a wave of migration from the west, and Tutsi came much later from the northeast. Picture a community of fewer than 33,000 people living in makeshift settlements on the edges of towns, often without access to clean water, electricity, or basic healthcare, while tourists pay thousands of dollars to visit the protected forests that were once their homes. You won't believe the economic disparity. While Rwanda's economy grows at 7% annually and urban areas modernize rapidly, TWA families survive on less than $1 per day, with unemployment rates exceeding 80% in their communities. Here's the tragic part: their traditional pottery and crafts, once essential to Rwandan culture, now sell for pennies to tourists as curiosities, while the knowledge of medicinal plants and forest management that sustained them for millennia becomes increasingly irrelevant in modern Rwanda. The government has launched integration programs, but cultural barriers remain so strong that many TWA children drop out of school due to discrimination from other ethnic groups, perpetuating cycles of poverty and exclusion. Rwanda has one of the world's most extreme population densities, with 525 people per square kilometer, yet 70% of citizens still work in subsistence agriculture. Here's the scary part: Rwanda packs more people into each square kilometer than most European countries, yet the vast majority still depend on small-scale farming for survival, creating an unsustainable pressure on limited land resources. Picture a country smaller than Maryland trying to feed 13.2 million people, where the average farm is only 0.76 hectares, less than 2 acres, and families often subdivide their plots among children until individual portions become too small to support a household. You heard right, this tiny nation has a population density higher than the Netherlands, but unlike wealthy European countries with advanced economies, Rwanda's rural masses still practice traditional agriculture on increasingly fragmented plots. Wait until you find out the mathematical reality. With population growing at 2.4% annually, experts calculate that by 2050, average farm sizes will shrink to just 0.25 hectares per family, making subsistence agriculture virtually impossible. The pressure is so intense that farmers have been forced to cultivate steep hillsides prone to erosion, leading to soil degradation that reduces crop yields just when more food production is desperately needed. Think the government has solutions? Think again. Despite ambitious plans to modernize agriculture and move people into cities, cultural attachment to land ownership runs so deep that many Rwandans refuse to relocate even when offered better economic opportunities, preferring to remain on ancestral plots that can barely sustain their families. Rwanda's traditional justice system, called Gakaka, involved entire communities judging their neighbors' crimes, and over 2 million cases were processed this way after the genocide. Sounds unbelievable, but Rwanda revived an ancient community-based justice system where ordinary citizens, not trained judges, decided the fate of genocide perpetrators in outdoor gatherings that resembled town hall meetings more than formal courts. Picture this: in villages across Rwanda, neighbors who had lived alongside each other for decades sat in circles under trees, with genocide survivors facing their attackers, while community elders facilitated discussions about truth, reconciliation, and punishment. You won't believe the scale. Between 2002 and 2012, approximately 12,000 Gakaka courts processed over 2 million cases related to genocide crimes, handling everything from property theft to murder accusations. Here's where it gets really intense. These weren't professional mediators but local community members elected by their neighbors, making life-or-death decisions about people they knew personally, often including friends, relatives, and business associates. The emotional weight was staggering. Imagine sitting in judgment of your child's teacher, your neighbor who borrowed tools from you, or the shopkeeper who sold you goods for years, now accused of participating in mass killings. Wait until you find out the results. While controversial, studies show that Gakacha achieved reconciliation rates of over 80% in participating communities, with former enemies often becoming friends again through the public truth-telling process. Here's the most remarkable part. This traditional system processed cases faster and cheaper than formal courts ever could have, completing in 10 years what would have taken international tribunals centuries to accomplish, while creating a uniquely Rwandan path to healing that prioritized community restoration over punishment. Kigali is considered Africa's cleanest city, but it's achieved through surveillance and social pressure so intense that littering can result in public shaming and community service. Here's the scary part. Rwanda's capital maintains its spotless appearance through a combination of citizen monitoring, peer pressure, and consequences that go far beyond simple fines. You heard right. Dropping even a small piece of trash in Kigali can result in immediate confrontation from strangers who view littering as a serious social violation worthy of public intervention. Picture walking through pristine streets where locals actively police each other's behavior, with citizens regularly approaching tourists and residents who litter to demand they pick up their trash immediately. The social enforcement is so strong that children as young as 8 years old will confidently scold adults for improper waste disposal, creating a culture where environmental cleanliness becomes a moral imperative rather than just a legal requirement. Wait until you find out about the consequences. Repeat littering offenders can be sentenced to participate in additional community cleaning during umuganda sessions, essentially doubling their mandatory service time while being publicly identified as someone who doesn't respect community standards. Think you can litter when no one's watching? Think again. Rwanda has developed an informal network of citizen observers who report environmental violations to local authorities, with neighborhood leaders maintaining detailed records of residents who consistently fail to maintain cleanliness standards. Here's the most intense part. In some districts, serial litterers can face social ostracism that affects their ability to participate in community savings groups, access microloans, or even arrange marriages for their children, making environmental responsibility a prerequisite for full social acceptance. Number 8. Rwanda has virtually eliminated malaria in urban areas through the most aggressive mosquito control program in Africa, but rural regions still struggle with outbreaks. You won't believe the transformation. Kigali, once plagued by malaria-carrying mosquitoes, now has infection rates below 1% through a comprehensive program that includes house-to-house spraying, mandatory bed net distribution, and community health workers who test and treat patients within 24 hours of symptom onset. Picture health workers armed with GPS devices and smartphones, tracking every single malaria case in real time, mapping infection patterns, and responding to outbreaks with military precision that would impress epidemiologists in developed countries. The urban success is staggering. Malaria deaths in Kigali dropped by 87% between 2020, turning a major killer into a rare occurrence through sustained investment in prevention and treatment. Wait until you find out the resource challenge. Maintaining urban malaria elimination costs approximately $15 per person annually, but rural areas receive only $3 per person for malaria control, creating disparities that urban politicians struggle to address without raising taxes. The contrast is so stark that rural families sometimes travel to cities specifically during malaria season, knowing they'll receive better prevention and treatment services, but creating temporary population pressures that strain urban infrastructure. Here's the ironic part. Rwanda's urban malaria success has become a model for other African countries, yet the same strategies remain financially out of reach for Rwanda's own rural populations, highlighting the economic constraints that limit even the most successful public health programs. Number 7. Traditional Rwandan culture forbids women from eating certain foods like chicken and eggs, yet the country has the highest percentage of female entrepreneurs in East Africa. Here's the wild contradiction. Rwanda leads East Africa with 58% of businesses owned by women, making it a regional powerhouse for female entrepreneurship. Yet traditional cultural beliefs still restrict women's diets in ways that would shock modern nutritionists. Sounds unbelievable, but many rural Rwandan women still avoid eating chicken, eggs, and certain cuts of meat based on centuries-old beliefs that these foods will make them infertile, promiscuous, or bring bad luck to their families. Imagine this for a moment. A successful female business owner in Rwanda, employing dozens of people and exporting her products all around the world. Yet when she returns home, she sits down to enjoy a traditional meal that leaves out certain protein sources simply because her culture considers them inappropriate for women. Yeah, you heard that right. Even in a society where women are empowered to thrive in business, there are still dietary taboos that restrict what they can eat, especially during important times like pregnancy and breastfeeding. The level of business achievement is honestly impressive. Rwandan women actually start companies at rates 3 times higher than men, often in areas like agriculture, textiles, and services. The government backs them up too, offering things like preferential loans and hands-on training programs to support female entrepreneurs. Think again. Many successful businesswomen navigate both worlds skillfully, using their economic independence to gradually challenge dietary restrictions while respecting cultural traditions that maintain family harmony. Here's the fascinating evolution. Younger urban women increasingly ignore food taboos, while older rural women often maintain restrictions even when they can afford previously forbidden foods, creating generational divides within families where grandmothers and granddaughters eat completely different meals at the same table. Number 6. Rwanda operates Africa's most advanced drone delivery system for medical supplies, flying life-saving blood to remote hospitals faster than ground transport could ever manage. Wait until you find out that this small African nation has leapfrogged developed countries in medical logistics by using autonomous drones to deliver blood, vaccines, and emergency medications to hospitals across the country in under 30 minutes. You heard right. Rwanda's drone network, operated by the company Zipline, completes over 2,000 deliveries monthly, covering 75% of the country's territory, with flying robots that can navigate mountain terrain and weather conditions that would ground traditional aircraft. Picture a motorcycle accident victim bleeding out in a remote hospital while a drone carrying matching blood type flies overhead at 80 miles per hour, automatically calculating wind patterns and optimal landing coordinates to deliver life-saving supplies in 15 minutes versus the 4+ hours ground transport would require. The technology is so advanced that drones can drop packages with pinpoint accuracy using biodegradable parachutes, then automatically return to base for the next delivery without any human intervention. Here's the mind-blowing scale. Since 2016, these drones have delivered over 500,000 units of blood and medical supplies, saving an estimated 8,000 lives by getting critical medications to patients who would have died waiting for conventional delivery methods. Think again. Rwanda's drone delivery system has become so successful that other countries including Ghana, Nigeria, and even parts of the United States are copying the model. The irony is striking. A country where many rural areas lack reliable electricity now operates one of the world's most sophisticated automated logistics networks, proving that sometimes developing nations can skip intermediate technologies and jump directly to cutting-edge solutions. Number 5. The Rwandan government has implemented a monthly car-free day in Kigali where private vehicles are banned from city streets, and violators face $200 fines plus vehicle impoundment. Here's the shocking part. Twice monthly, Kigali transforms into a pedestrian paradise where cars are completely prohibited on most streets, creating an urban environment so different that visitors struggle to recognize the same city they saw the day before. You won't believe the enforcement police set up roadblocks throughout the city, and any private vehicle caught violating the car-free restrictions faces immediate impoundment plus fines that represent half a month's salary for average workers. Picture a modern African capital where suddenly the only sounds are children playing, people walking, and birds chirping, while normally traffic-clogged streets become running tracks, outdoor markets, and community gathering spaces. The transformation is so complete that air quality measurements show pollution levels drop by 60% during car-free days, giving residents a monthly reminder of what their city could feel like without constant vehicle emissions. Wait until you find out the social impact these car-free days have become major community events, where families picnic on normally busy streets, street vendors set up in parking lots, and spontaneous soccer games break out on major thoroughfares. The economic effects are fascinating. While some businesses initially complained about lost customers, studies show that foot traffic increases by 300% during car-free days, with restaurants, cafes, and shops near pedestrian zones reporting higher sales than normal driving days. Here's the most ambitious part. President Kagame has announced plans to eventually make central Kigali permanently car-free, with private vehicles banned from the downtown core, except for deliveries during specific hours, potentially making Rwanda's capital the first major African city to prioritize pedestrians over cars in urban planning. Rwanda has one of the world's lowest crime rates, but it's maintained through neighborhood surveillance networks where every citizen is expected to monitor and report on their neighbors' activities. Sounds unbelievable, but Rwanda achieves murder rates lower than most European countries through a social control system where community members are legally obligated to know and report unusual activities in their neighborhoods. You heard right. The country operates on a cell system where every 10 to 15 households form a group with designated leaders responsible for monitoring everything from domestic disputes to suspicious visitors, creating a grassroots intelligence network that reaches into every corner of Rwandan society. Picture living in a place where your neighbors can tell government officials exactly who visited your house, when they arrived, how long they stayed, and what they discussed. All in the name of maintaining community security and preventing crime. The results are undeniably impressive. Rwanda's homicide rate is 2.5 per 100,000 people compared to South Africa's 36 per 100,000, making it statistically safer than many American cities. Here's where it gets intense. Cell leaders conduct monthly meetings where residents must account for family members' whereabouts, employment status, and any changes in household composition with detailed records maintained at multiple government levels. Think you can maintain privacy? Think again. The system is so comprehensive that attempting to avoid participation marks you as suspicious, potentially leading to increased scrutiny and official questioning about why you're reluctant to engage with community security measures. The psychological impact is profound. Knowing that someone is always watching creates a self-policing effect where people modify their behavior to avoid attracting attention, resulting in exceptionally low crime rates but also social pressure that some critics describe as suffocating. Traditional Rwandan wedding ceremonies can last up to 8 days and cost more than most families earn in 5 years, yet 85% of marriages are still arranged by parents. Here's the mind-blowing reality. Despite Rwanda's reputation for progress and modernization, the vast majority of marriages still follow traditional patterns where parents select spouses for their children, with elaborate ceremonies that can bankrupt entire extended families. You won't believe the expense. A typical traditional wedding involves multiple ceremonies over a week-long period, with costs ranging from $15,000 to $50,000 for families whose average annual income is only $800, forcing relatives to pool resources and take on debt that can take decades to repay. Picture the Gusaba ceremony where the groom's family formally requests the bride from her parents, followed by Kwanje where gifts are exchanged, then Gutaliza where the bride price is negotiated, and finally Ubukwe, the actual wedding celebration, each requiring different outfits, food, drinks, and entertainment for hundreds of guests. The bride price negotiations alone can involve 20 to 30 cows, goats, traditional beer, modern household items, and cash payments that total more than a new car costs in developed countries. Wait until you find out the social pressure. Families often go into debt or sell property to fund these weddings because failing to meet traditional expectations brings shame that affects the entire family's reputation for generations. Here's the fascinating paradox. While 85% of marriages begin with parental arrangement, divorce rates remain below 10% because the extensive family involvement in partner selection and the massive financial investment create strong incentives to make marriages work. Think young people rebel against this system? Think again. Surveys show that 70% of Rwandan youth still prefer arranged marriages, trusting their parents' judgment over their own romantic feelings when choosing life partners. Rwanda has achieved 99% health insurance coverage for its population. But the system operates through mandatory community-based schemes where neighbors collectively decide who deserves medical care. Wait until you find out that Rwanda's remarkable healthcare achievement comes with a twist that would shock Americans accustomed to individual insurance policies. The community-based health insurance system called Mutuelis requires neighborhood groups to collectively pay premiums and jointly decide which medical treatments members can receive. You heard right. Your neighbors literally vote on whether you can get expensive medical procedures, creating a system where community relationships directly impact your access to healthcare. Picture needing surgery that costs $500, but your community insurance group has only $300 remaining in their annual budget, forcing a neighborhood meeting where people who know your family history, work ethic, and social contributions decide whether you're worth the investment. The system covers 45% of Rwanda's population through these community schemes, with members paying annual premiums of $6 to $12 per person, while collectively pooling risk and resources at the local level. Here's where it gets really complex. Community groups can impose additional requirements like mandatory participation in health education sessions, regular medical checkups, or even behavioral changes like quitting smoking before approving expensive treatments. The social dynamics are intense. Members who don't pay premiums on time, skip community meetings, or are seen as antisocial may find their neighbors less willing to support costly medical interventions when resources are limited. Think this creates conflicts? You're absolutely right. Disputes over medical coverage decisions have led to family feuds and community divisions, especially when popular community members receive expensive treatments while less liked individuals are denied similar care. Here's the remarkable outcome, despite these challenges. Rwanda's infant mortality rate dropped by 70% and life expectancy increased by 15 years since implementing this system, proving that community-based healthcare can achieve dramatic results even when individual choice is sacrificed for collective coverage. Number 1. Rwanda has banned all religious activities and church services on Sundays in certain districts to enforce mandatory participation in community work, making it possibly the only country where government labor takes precedence over religious worship. Here's the most shocking fact that will change everything you thought you knew about religious freedom. In several Rwandan districts, churches are legally required to close on the last Sunday of every month to ensure 100% participation in umuganda community service, with religious leaders facing fines and possible imprisonment if they hold competing services during mandatory work hours. You won't believe how this policy supersedes constitutional religious protections. While Rwanda's constitution guarantees freedom of worship, local government officials have determined that community service takes precedence over individual religious practices, creating a system where civic duty literally trumps spiritual obligations. Picture pastors announcing to their congregations that church is canceled by government decree, with armed police stationed outside religious buildings to ensure compliance, while believers who attempt to hold underground prayer meetings face arrest for undermining state-mandated community participation. The enforcement is so strict that even Christian funeral services have been postponed if they conflict with umuganda schedules, forcing families to delay burials until after mandatory community work is completed. Wait until you find out the international implications. This policy has created diplomatic tensions with religious organizations worldwide, yet Rwanda maintains that national unity through collective labor supersedes individual spiritual practices, arguing that building infrastructure together creates stronger social bonds than separate worship activities. Here's the most controversial aspect. Government officials argue that traditional African values emphasized community cooperation over individual religious expression, making umuganda a return to authentic cultural practices rather than an infringement on modern religious rights. Think religious leaders accept this quietly? Think again. Several pastors have been imprisoned for conducting unauthorized Sunday services during umuganda periods, while others have relocated their congregations to neighboring countries where religious freedom doesn't compete with mandatory state labor requirements. The global implications are staggering. Rwanda's model of prioritizing state-mandated community service over religious worship represents a unique approach to nation-building that challenges fundamental assumptions about human rights, religious freedom, and the relationship between individual liberty and collective responsibility. So we've just discovered Rwanda's most incredible contradictions, from mandatory community service that overrides religious freedom to traditional cultures that coexist with Africa's most advanced drone delivery systems. Which one shocked you the most? Have you ever experienced government policies that required choosing between personal beliefs and civic duties? If these hidden truths about Rwanda blew your mind, smash that subscribe button, because next week we're exposing the most unbelievable secrets about Singapore that will make you question everything you know about authoritarian success stories.